And we're joined by Dave Buchholz and Elizabeth Hogue. If you could, just to get us started here, we'll start with you, Liz. Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it?
So I'm Elizabeth Hogue. I am currently at NGA, and I work in their senior policy as their senior policy advisor. So any of the issues that come up through our agency, the personnel issues, would come to me for a look, a resolution, and new innovative ideas. I don't know, I've previously helped out with the government executive with our Engage program, which brings people in from industry to come work in the government or send our people out to industry. So it's that kind of innovation that we're really trying to push at NGA that I'm lucky enough to get to work.
And Dale, who are you?
Dale Buchholz. I am the deputy for the Human Development Directorate, and I'm a new returnee to NGA in May, and I am responsible for the day-to-day operations of human development. We oversee probably about 800 folks that are in the human development because we have a large college that's there, and our talent development function really handles the entire agency, so it's a pretty operational function that has performance management at its core, so I'm super excited about chatting about that this morning.
Excellent, and I'd like to start there because the Human Resources Director, the Human Development Director is kind of like NGA's HR department, correct? But it's different, right? It's got a different name, but there's more to it than a traditional HR shop.
Yeah, so just briefly from an organizational structure, our NGA College is probably the largest, and they really deal in the trade craft component of our workforce, and how do we maintain that subject matter expertise on all the analysts and all the people that operate within NGA. And there's also a leadership development and supervisory component that is within that college. Then our next largest office is talent development. Talent development is really responsible for the assignments and the career development of every employee. So that's the second largest function, probably about 200, 250 folks that are inside there. And then you get into the traditional roles of benefits folks, of who takes care of the workforce writ large, policy stuff where Liz works really, really close with our policy team to write the things that are necessary for our organization. And then finally, we have a talent acquisition center. And so we have stood up something that really focuses, because we are at the heart of transformation right now to move towards STEM degrees. And so that talent acquisition piece is critical in what we're doing as an agency. And so those folks are the ones that are going out and hiring our new folks.
Liz, from your experience, how different is NGA's director compared to other HR shops, and what difference does that make?
NGA is much broader. A couple of years ago, we went through a big effort we referred to at the time as Mission Talent Alignment, and now it is just part of our daily operations. And that was to look at how we as an agency can transform and transition and evolve into our future when most of our employees sat in the same seat for many, 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 many years. And that was great for them. They became experts, but it did not allow other employees to develop that skill. And when those employees would leave, we had holes. And we're a combat support agency, which means that soldiers on the ground depend on our data and our GeoInt every single day, and they can't just say, hey, hold on, we'll train somebody new and we'll be back with you in a few months. So that has taken a big culture change for us. People are not used to having to move. There's certainly a portion of the population, I know, Dale, maybe about 30%, that loved the idea of going from office to office and mission to mission, but a large portion really didn't want to move. So how we brought them on into this new culture change, into this new performance effort of the agency, which is an ongoing effort, fits and starts certainly, but able to help them see where they fit into the agency. And that was this new directorate that was stood up in human development, which is solely dedicated to the employees. Employees are assigned to work roles, and employees are assigned to organizations. But the employee and their career and their next move comes out of our career, wait a minute, now I'm forgetting the name of it.
Talent development.
The talent development group. They own the people, and the KCs, our key components, which are our mission offices, they own the positions. So those two groups have to work together for the movements of the people and making sure that they are staffed with the appropriate talent to meet the mission. And that's different. We're used to managers being able to select people and then put them in the positions that they want to put them in. And now we have a broader scope look for the agency.
That's fascinating. You also have a slightly different pay structure at NGA versus most agencies, right? Your pay for performance. So is that just big bonus checks at the end of the year for people that hit certain?
So back
specific
in
metrics?
1999, NGA moved out on having a pay-banded pay structure and pay for performance. NGA was originally NEMA, the National Imagery and Mapping Agency, and we were a build of a number of different organizations. A big one was the Defense Mapping Agency, big Title V organization, and a big piece came from the CIA, which was, of course, an accepted service. You know, they had different kinds of rules. And all of a sudden, we were all kind of put in this environment together to figure out a way to make it work. And in order to help our culture be one agency, instead of, you know, I used to be in this agency and I still think that way, we created pay bands and a pay-banded pay for performance structure. And that structure has evolved since 1999. It has certainly had some evolution and some challenges, but it is the way that we do business, and I think we've looked at our numbers, and over 50% of our people have never worked in a graded environment. So this is all they know. We are a part of DCIPS, which is the Title X Defense Civilian Intelligence Personnel System, and that entire system also, around the time of the NSPS and DoD, tried to move into pay bands, and it just wasn't the right time, and along with NSPS, they went a different direction. But we were allowed to stay because, again, this was all our people knew. It is different, right? Everybody doesn't get a promotion every single year. You might have 4 promotions in your entire career, and that is a culture change. So it makes us recognize performance in other ways, through awards, through bonuses, through opportunities just to pat somebody on the back or give them an experience they wouldn't otherwise maybe be able to take advantage of. But it is all about the performance, and it allows us flexibility to move them through these bands.
And Dale, it really isn't like other parts in government, right? This is a different culture structure for how these things go. Do you see a lot of culture shock from people coming from other agencies into NGA, and vice versa? What's the culture change look like for people coming from industry, from the private sector into NGA?
Yeah, and Liz touched on it a little bit. You know, an employee can maybe look at 4 promotions, and I think that's kind of optimistic because a lot of our folks come in at pay band 3. They can get promoted to pay band 4. Pay band 5 is a GS-15 equivalent, and getting there is maybe. So you might have 2, and so it goes to how do you keep these people engaged? What does that look like for folks? And so there are a number of different ways that we, I think it was Robert before that talked about engagement, wanted to expand this conversation broader than just engagement. But employee engagement is the key piece to keeping folks motivated and understanding what we do. NGA is a very technical organization, and so that subject matter expertise is critical. So how do we develop them? How do we send them off to training? How do we make them feel relevant is a key piece to making sure that they don't feel so shocked when they're coming in and they're not having a step every year or every 2 years in a promotion. So we help them in other ways to show that their relevancy and, quite frankly, the pay that we provide our folks as new folks that come in and how we treat them, I think is also a little bit different. So it helps them transition a little bit better.
You mentioned training. Are there other incentives that you try to build into the system?
Right. So every year we do a competitive call process, like many organizations, for very, very awesome training opportunities throughout the nation, both within private industry and within government agencies, to select a large number of our workforce to go off and become developed for training opportunities. And so we put those panels together and we select those folks every year to go out and then with a service commitment come back to us so that we can retain them and infuse that tradecraft and all that new learning back in there. And so it's a great incentive piece for our workforce.
Excellent. Dale, let's stay with you for a moment. When we talk about performance management, when most people think about it, they think about your annual assessment, right? Where are you on that scale, whether it be 1 to 5 or whatever scale you're using? Is that the entirety of management? Is it just about making sure people are hitting those metrics?
Yeah, Aaron, that's it's a great point. And so I like when I talk performance management, we like to open the aperture really, really wide, because really performance management starts with what is that organization's value proposition, right? What is it they are trying to do? And if an organization doesn't understand who their customer is, and I know that's odd sometimes coming from a federal agency, but federal agencies morph and transform themselves, right? They got to stay relevant. And if you don't understand who your customer is and the product that you're delivering, then you can't start on that left side of performance management, which is understanding what you need to deliver to those customers the product that makes you relevant. So in that, we want to first start with what that looks like from a billet perspective. What are the functions that are required to perform and deliver? And so once you have that billet structure understood, then you can start figuring out, all right, how many apprentices do you need and how many experts do you need in that whole span? And that makes up that total organizational structure. And then you can start putting faces to those spaces and bringing those in. And as you bring in those faces, then you can moderate and you have levers to move your workforce based on things like a Vera VSIP, based on retirements, and looking at your entire spectrum. And it's only in the middle when we start talking about performance appraisals when we think, a lot of people when they say performance management, they go right to that performance appraisal. Performance appraisals are simply a way that we moderate our workforce and make sure that they're performing against those initial expectations that we went as an organization. So it's extremely broad. And I would go even on the right side is when we say thank you for everything they've done in our organization and let them transition into their next part of their lives is the end of that performance management cycle, and it starts all over again.
So basically, to the end of their career with you.
Absolutely.
Right, never really ends. And Liz, you had an interesting breakdown for that as well from the beginning of that life cycle about really making sure you distinguish who's who, what's what. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. The NGA system does work on an annual pay-for-performance cycle, which means that we have to distinguish between employee performance in order to determine what would be the appropriate pay increase that each employee gets every year. So instead of a step increase with a 1, 2, or 3 year waiting period, every single year an employee, based on their performance, the little piece of that big pie, gets put into our pay pool, which runs an algorithm. We have a pay pool of managers who discuss each employee in that pool, and that is what determines what the salary increase is. So a high performer may move faster than they would in a GS system, but other employees may work approximately the same progression level or even a little bit slower. It is actually created to model off of the GS system in that you move faster at the lower grades and slower towards the end at the higher steps within the band or within the grades and bands. So that's really important to employees. And then at the same time as that is done is we have the bonus process, which is very similar to bonus processes used across the federal government. We put about 50% of our bonus money in the bonus pool to be determined at the end of the year based on the end of the year performance, but we keep 50% out that is used throughout the year to try, as we heard earlier, to recognize as soon as performance is occurring to be able to quickly step in and do that. We're not as quick as one might wish to be. We are working on it. But that's an area for our focus right now is to get beyond just this maybe quarterly thing or twice a year thing to be able to literally say, wow, that was great performance on whatever, and in your next paycheck you'll see this great award.
Excellent. Are there any questions in the audience? I can keep going up here, but I want to make sure that we break in. If anybody wants to ask anything, just shoot your hand up and we'll make sure that we get a mic to you as we keep going here. As we talk about performance management, though, I think it's always important to make sure that we realign with our ultimate goal, right? Now, what is the goal of performance management? Is it just to get the most out of your employees? Is it to milk them and make sure that you get everything you can get out of them?
No, of course, performance management is to make sure we're delivering on the things that we said we were going to deliver on. So as the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, we owe those military folks, those combatants that are out there fighting every day, as well as our intelligence community, decision makers, and our policy makers, we owe them exquisite information. We owe them the best information possible for them to make decisions. So when I think about performance management, I think about that whole cycle of how do we make sure that we deliver to that end user that product we need. And so it's a matter of understanding the capability we need, the right people we need, the right systems we need, and the right delivery method, because throughput, as we get information out, that always seems to be the longest pole in the tent. So performance management includes that entire component there. I just wanted to touch on one point that Liz made about the 50-50 split on our performance management and how we do awards and how we do our bonuses. Is that award piece is something that we just changed that percentage this year. And I think it is a critical, I think that will be part of the dialogue today, is as we try to make sure that our workforce remains engaged and relevant about what we do, we use that vehicle as an immediate way. We'd like it more immediate. We'd like to, my ask is that the branch chief level is able to deliver on that day, and it shows up in that next pay period. I think we're getting there and closing that gap. But it is a key piece of making sure that performance is, number one, not diluted, because I don't want everybody to feel like they're getting a parting gift, but really recognizing folks that are innovative in transforming that agency and the way that we are articulating, and it's making a difference. We're seeing it makes a difference in our workforce today.
Yes, sir.
Non-financial,
We'll get a microphone for you.
what non-financial incentives are you using?
Yeah, so I'll take first crack, and Liz, if you want to give your experience too. So from a non-financial standpoint, we are emphasizing that conversation. And the conversation with employees, first and foremost, goes to what is it that you seek in your career, right? And so that was part of that talent development stand-up, is that we want to understand, first and foremost, what the goals are of the employee. Now, that doesn't mean that our agency is going to run on the druthers of the individual employee, but we're going to align those desires with the mission sets that we have. And so it goes to an earlier conversation about understanding and assessing your workforce and those skills that they have. And so we go through a pretty in-depth process of matching competencies and assessment, and so that we can navigate. And to the extent that we can put our employees on the path that they desire, as well as what the mission needs, we're finding that has a tremendous amount of a return on investment for our workforce from a non-financial standpoint.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, is the value there that you will, if I were to join NGA, you would steward my career?
Absolutely. You know, and not to rob Maslow, but, you know, people love self-actualization, right? They care about where they go and what they do and how they contribute. And to the extent that we can align those, I think it's bonus for our agency and it's bonus for the employee.
And a follow-up that I open up to both of you, whichever would like to jump on it. The mission at NGA is very strong, right? We're talking about protecting life and limb of our soldiers, so there's definitely a drive there to bring people in. You have the pay-for-performance pay bands, which might be a little more attractive than some other pay scales at agencies for some people. And you have the training, where you really teach people the skills they're going to need to be good at their careers. But is that enough of a draw? Are you finding that once you've trained people that they're leaving for the private sector? Is money still just too much of a hurdle?
Money certainly can be a part of the hurdle, but what our belief is that you don't necessarily have to come to NGA for your entire career. If you come and you give us 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, that's awesome. We've helped you, we've stewarded your career with you, we've trained you, you've given to us, right? So this is a fair deal at every step of the way. But when you go out to private industry and you do great things, maybe you want to come back. We'd love to see you come back. And that's part of my other initiative, which is, you know, better engagement, better understanding that you're not leaving the family. You leave, you're welcome, right? Come back, show us what you've learned, and come back. Don't feel that you have to stay with us, because that's that whole stagnant kind of thing that happens to an agency, and that impacts our ability to transform and move forward on the performance of the entire agency. So we're happy. We're not really happy when you go, but you know what I mean. We're happy to celebrate with you that you have a new opportunity, and around the bend, come back, and we're starting to see that with our people coming back. And that's a great thing. A lot of leaders, Dale here, right, came from outside. So it's not an impediment as much as one might think. It's a scary new thing, and you think that that's going to happen, that people are just going to leave, but they don't. There's also the patriotic thing. People come to us, and in our STEM world and in our special emphasis on trying to work with industry, they're not coming to me and to NGA because we can pay them as much money as they're getting. They're coming because we have a really important mission that we're now able to share. Our recruiting efforts have shifted our message to really point out what it is that you can do for your country and the mission, and then decide where you want to be for the rest of your career.
Yeah, and the ad is that as we're going out there and we're recruiting, we do have this piece, that service equity that we can put out there and that people are drawn to. And we don't discount, and we communicate it a lot, that we have hard problems. We have some of the hardest problems the nation will face. And young folks that are coming out of college, we're finding more and more want to be on those teams that solve those hardest problems. And like Liz talks about, they may solve a few of those problems and they'll bounce out and they'll go do something else. The very nature of a lot of people that are coming out of the STEM fields are, and this generation are, they are not, as you've heard it before, people are not doing 30, 40-year careers in single places. And so we understand that, and we're okay with that. I did 6 years with NGA. I left for 5 years and completely resigned and went out. And, you know, when you resign from the federal government, people kind of are like, wow, you left the federal government. But it's important, I think, for us as federal employees to go do those career broadening things and go do those things. And NGA welcomed me back. As soon as I was ready to come back, they were like, absolutely, fast-tracked me and got me right back in.
You check out, but you can never leave. Yeah. We'll get to a couple more questions in just a second, but I didn't want to take moderator's privilege here. Have you been doing anything at NGA to make that transition in both directions easier?
Yeah, I'll take, it's tough. Here, and the tough part is this. We are, we have to have a security clearance. We have to have the highest security clearance. And so that security clearance process always goes through some temporal piece, right? And so we have done a fantastic job of expediting that, but the fact of the matter is we still struggle with how fast we can onboard somebody. And it's just one of those things we deal with. So we're talking about sometimes a 4 to 6 month lag from the time that we can get. So engaging those folks that we want to get back, there is nothing like staying in constant contact and updating them and communicating. So that's why we stood up our talent acquisition center, so that we can staff it with the people, so that we can provide not just an email, automated email update, to pick up the phone and to say, listen, here's where you are. We're moving through this. We have this particular, and giving them those phases so they can do that to make that transition much, much easier. And then on the back end, we sometimes forget about this part of it. And on the back end of it, we don't just say thank you very much. Here's a thank you handshake and walk out. We have now stood up a offboarding, no different than we do an onboarding event. We do an offboarding event to say thank you. Our director goes in there. You can outprocess all your things that you need to turn in your badge, turn in everything. And it's really a celebration for what they did for us to go back. And we're finding that those people just rave about that particular component.
Excellent. Do you know your average time to onboard?
130 days.
This gentleman over here has been waiting very patiently. Can we get him a mic?
Thanks. Hi. I'm trying to wrap my mind around what you're saying here, and I'm researching it. So it seems like the NGA is like an anomaly, in that it still pays to performance-based pay grade increases, but a lot of people, and since 2012, DSIPs, other intelligence agencies have not been using that system, so like they went away from it, and now the NGA are kind of exempt from it, and so NGA is like this, they're in a different pay scale, like a lot of government employees are not GS, and then they're getting this performance increases, and it's banned. I get it. My whole point of it, trying to understand, is how is this applicable to other agencies, and do you feel that other agencies are even trying to adopt what you're doing there? I think based on NGA's mission, it seems like it may be more applicable or reasonable to have a performance base based on the kind of people you're trying to draw in. And I get it, I'm hearing it's like really great, I'm hearing this, but like a lot of other agencies maybe not have that ability to recruit specialized tasks, the kind of combat mission support that you're doing there. So I just want to kind of wrap my mind around it, because I don't understand how it can be applicable to other agencies, because are we moving that way, are we not? Is NGA kind of its own little world, and think, hey, you know, so you talk about that a
Sure.
little bit.
So I think it's important to remember that we're all still a part of the same system. So I would argue that every single federal government agency has a mission that they can pitch to people they want to bring in. They're all very important to the public. So finding that niche, the last time I sat up on the stage, it was with VA, and they have such a niche that they can pitch to get their high-tech STEM people in to work their systems. So it took a lot of looking around and say, what is it that's going to draw people to come to NGA? NGA is a part of the intelligence community. We're also a part of the Defense Intelligence Enterprise, which means that we're a sister agency to the NSA, to Defense Intelligence Agency, NRO, and the intelligence portions of the services. They are all in graded step structures. We crosswalk. We create crosswalks that will allow our people and other agencies to see how our structures and how our people would fit in. So it's not so much that we do things differently, right? Our pay structure works for us. Our pay for performance structure works for NGA. It wouldn't necessarily work for everybody else, but maybe there are flexibilities within the current OPM authorities that other people are following that could. The use of 3R incentives, right? When we were talking about what does it take to get some of these people to come in the door, sometimes it does take those incentives. The group incentive is what we're looking at right now because we have very specialized groups of positions and groups of employees we want to bring in, and we want to make sure that we're treating them all the same, and we can't get them in if we don't do something else. So part of my team's job is to basically scour all of the flexibilities that the government has. And there are a lot of flexibilities that have been built in, and we just didn't know about them. Not only flexibilities like at the higher levels like an IPA, but flexibilities and special programs to bring in STEM people. And they apply, in many cases, to a lot of organizations, not just an intelligence kind of a thing. So in your spare time, if you're looking for something new and flexible, take a look at what's out there and how those rules might actually apply to you, how you could work within something similar. So I've gotten great ideas looking at an authority that belongs to somebody else and being able to say, well, within our current authority, we can't do that whole thing, but we could do this piece of it. And that is something that, really shows us that we don't have to walk lockstep in the system kind of as we have over the past 50 years. There are flexibilities, and Congress isn't always going to give us exactly the moment we need some flexibility, so we've got to work with what we have. And I think OPM has been very generous in some flexibilities that we just have, they're just little used. So looking in, you might find some additional things you can use that you don't have to be just like us or have our specific authorities.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the advice to other agencies, the wider audience beyond NGA, is not that you should all be on pay-for-performance pay bands. That's not what you're saying. You're saying, look at the options, look at your workforce and what they need, and there are things you can do differently. Very interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to brag on Liz for a second because Liz is a JDA into NGA. She's an attorney by trade, so she's got the ability to go out there and research those things. So if you don't have a Liz Hogue, you need to find a Liz Hogue that can go through that because those are the key pieces. The federal government is a large apparatus, and there are a ton of things out there that you can do as an organization, as an agency, to flex through those things. So absolutely find somebody like this.
Will NGA share their Liz Hogue?
No.
No, okay. So right over here. Do we have one? Yeah.
Billy Leiserson from BL Insights. So I want to circle back to something that Liz said about culture change. So you had talked about the need to have more than one person involved in specific jobs and also how that helps with alignment. So what I'd like to ask a little bit more about, how have you been going about to get a culture change, and what things have you found work with people who may be used to working in their own box, silos, as we say, and how's that been going there?
I think communication is your number one. We had some missteps, right? We planned our, we drew out exactly how this was all going to work, and it got out to the workforce, and they believed that that they were going to have to move every 3 years and that they may have to pack up and move, and all these things would happen to them, and they got a little, I don't want to move, I don't want to be a part of this. And I think we quickly tried to right that boat with communication and explain what was really going to happen, but you got to get in front of that, because now it's taking us twice the effort to undo what people's misperceptions were, where if we had been much clearer up front on the impact, I think we probably would have been a little better off. So there is a lesson for anybody.
Yeah, and the communication was the key piece, because we went through the right process, which was the vertical cut through the organization, bringing all those different work roles into a room to say, what are the things that we are needing to develop and have in our workforce. The workforce understood that they developed the competencies and the work roles against the mission sets, and we will apply our skills, and we will move as those missions morph. We probably just didn't communicate it as best we could, and it caused us to get a little wonky on the transition to it. And now that the workforce sees exactly how those competencies and everything, and we've written the guidance out on there, it's become much better.
And I think that sounds like it's the lesson of the day here for this, which is it's a full life cycle, right? If you're focused on any one piece, you're failing. You really have to look at the entire career of your people and your organization as a whole. Great, and that is our time. Dale, Liz, thanks for joining us. Please.